Now that you've conquered Haga Basin, let's get you set up to conquer the Deep Desert. First, we got to get a base set up though. I mentioned this in my last video, but we're going to go a little bit deeper here. If you are serious about T6, it's necessary for a Deep Desert base. The main reason is the volumes of resources. For example, 500 melange is 100 volumes. That would be 25,000 spice sand in the Large Spice Refinery, and that would equal 3,750 volumes. That's almost 38 times more if you don't refine it first. Plastinium is not as severe, but it's still noticeably easier to haul it after it's refined. 500 plastinium would be 500 volumes, and the unrefined resources would total out to 2,550 volumes, so more than 5 times heavier if you don't refine it first. I put a couple starter kits that should provide the basics for a few different types of players. I mostly did these based on the number of assault ornithopter trips that you need to haul everything out there. Keep in mind you will always have more stuff to bring back, so there will be more trips back than there is to get the stuff out there. First off, we have this basic one. This should be 1 assault trip's worth of stuff. We have our medium chemical refinery, medium ore refinery, 2 large wind traps, the medium spice refinery, 300,000 worth of water storage. We would do 1 large and 8 medium cisterns. Just a real quick side note, the medium ones are actually lighter or less volumes to carry, so you could go with all those ones, but eventually space is going to get a little bit hectic. So I threw 1 large one in there. But that would total out to 876 volumes. And you'll also have some space on your character. I did leave a few things out, but I will mention why at the end of this section. So that totals out to 1,015 power needed for this setup, and that would be 14 regular generators. This next one would be 2 assault trips for the more dedicated player. The difference with this one is that you would have the large ore refinery instead of the medium one, and more water production and water storage. If you are working towards that large spice refinery, this is a good setup to get there. 600,000 water, 4 large cisterns, and 8 medium ones. That totals out to 1,927 volumes. For this, you would need 1,590 power, which would be 22 regular generators. And then the third one, we have the more committed or long-term player. This would take 3 assault trips. This one simply replaces the medium spice refinery with the large one. Even at that half price cost to build it out in the deep desert, it still has 1,200 volumes to carry, which means you cannot make that in one trip with one person. And this totals out to 2,863 volumes. And that would be 1,740 power, and it would take 24 regular generators. Okay, so a few things I didn't include here. Building materials, these can be farmed easily in the PVE zones of the deep desert. So it's easier just to farm them once you get out there, or bring a few with you with that extra space that you have on your character. This also includes penta shields. I did not include these in the calculations. So these you cannot farm in the deep desert, so you will have to bring those resources with you. But they are cheap and light. They will definitely fit on your character. Just keep in mind that the larger they are and the more you have, the more power they are going to require. Fuel for generators can also be farmed out in the deep desert. Fuel cells are very heavy, so do yourself a favor and just farm some out there. Particulate filters are heavy and you cannot farm them in the deep desert, but I did not include them here because it will vary greatly from person to person on how many you need. Anytime you go back to Haga Basin, grab a few depending on what you're needing. Storage, these are light enough to carry on your character, so I also didn't include them here. I personally prefer the storage chests for setting up because they are very cheap and light also, and they only cost 1 resource, so they'll only take up 1 slot in your inventory. You can craft 8. That's 6,000 volumes of storage for just 80 iron out in the deep desert. That only takes up 32 volumes of space, so that will easily fit in the leftover space that you have on your character or on your ornithopter. So each trip out, you can fill up your character as much as possible. So if you are taking those 3 trips, you can bring back a whole lot of plastone, fuel cells, more storage, particulate filters, all those things that I didn't include in the Assault Orny storage calculations. That's why there is a little bit of extra space. And finally, really quickly, the location is not super important. You do want to be closer to the edge of the PVE zone though. The resources are heaviest in their raw form, so the shorter the distance that you have to travel with those raw forms of it, the better. There really is only one answer to water for the deep desert. It's large wind traps. Death stills are a problem because of all those bodies means a lot of extra trips. There's no good place to farm them out in the deep desert. You can carry 20 particulate filters, conservatively, on your character in one trip. That would be enough to yield 1.5 million water, because one filter lasts 12 hours. 12 hours produces 75,600 water in a wind trap. Your water needs will obviously vary from person to person, but in the examples I gave previously, the 300,000 and 600,000 are good starting points, simply because it limits how many trips you need. Let's put some production numbers to that so that you have an idea of how much more or less you might need. So 300,000 water is really not that much, but what you have to consider is how quickly you can actually farm this stuff. It costs 280,000 water to craft 400 melange. That would be 30,000 spice sand in the medium refinery. You as a solo will have a very hard time farming that much spice in a single day. So the water demands should cover that. Plastanium is more water intensive because of the multiple crafts, but even that 300,000 water supply should be able to craft you 200 plastanium per day. That would be approximately 600 Stravidium and 800 Titanium. And while you definitely can farm way more than that in a day, you might not need to. 200 plastanium is a lot to work with, especially for the more casual player. If you are a more dedicated person, you would probably be starting with that 600,000 water point anyways. And that would get you over 400 plastaniums worth in a day, right? Twice as much water, twice as much plastanium. As a solo, you are either not going to need 400 plastanium per day, or you won't be able to farm that much. So that's why the 600,000 water amount tends to be reasonable. You don't have to craft all that aluminum and duraluminum, the cobalt, the silicon, so the water needs are slightly less in the deep desert than in Haga Basin. Obviously, you might do a lot more farming. You might need plastanium and spice at the same time, so you might need more water, but remember, the 600,000 and the 300,000 are just starting points. Getting plant fibers to craft those filters might seem tedious, but it's a pretty quick process. Fibers are everywhere, so find any location with a couple larger patches, fly overhead with your scout and plan a small loop route. These plants respawn every 30 seconds, so you're trying to make a route that lasts 30 seconds. It can obviously go longer, it's just that the smaller the route is, the less time you spend running around, making this a little more efficient. In the right areas, you can get over 1,000 plant fibers in just 10 minutes. It is 15 fibers per particulate filter. So with that, you could craft 66 filters. Yes, there's other resources, but those are a lot easier to get at this point for you. If you are using the 4 wind traps, that's enough to fill all 4 for the entire deep desert week. So just 10 minutes of plant farming and your deep desert water needs are covered for the whole week. It's really not that bad. All right, the power demands are also much easier to deal with compared to your main base in Haga Basin, mostly because you don't have to deal with all those extra crafting structures. As I showed previously, you can get away with just using the basic generators if you're sticking to one of those limited setups. The cap without expanding your base is 40 production units, so plenty of space even if you're using that large spice refinery. The basic ones are useful because of the fact that you can just farm those resources out there. You can get both that salvaged metal to craft it and the fuel for it, so it saves you trips. It doesn't hurt to load up on a few fuel cells on your character inventory or that leftover space in the assault, just to get started. That way you can power your first couple generators and then just continue to get the rest of your fuel cells when you're out there. Because these fuel nodes also have a very short respawn timer, so it's pretty easy just to keep refarming the same node over and over. The pentashields will cost more the larger they get and the more you have, but they aren't outrageous for demand, so it shouldn't be too overwhelming. Overall, there really shouldn't be a need as a solo to upgrade beyond that basic power generator. Just remember, if you do end up upgrading, that's just a lot more resources that you're going to have to haul out and back from the deep desert. The Large Spice Refinery might not be for you. The reason is the cost to craft it, the cost to run it, and the lack of need for that much spice. You need 10,000 spice just to run this thing. That is really inconvenient for a solo. Let's say you have 6,000 spice and the week is ending and you can't find enough spice in time. Well, now you have to haul back an extra couple loads of very heavy spice sand. The half price cost of it has over 1,200 volumes, which means it will take 2 trips with 1 person. It's insanely expensive. It costs 500 melange if you're crafting it in the deep desert at that half price cost. But that 500 melange could go towards a whole lot of other things that you might need or want. The biggest question that you should have for yourself is how much spice do you need after you craft it? Let's say you save up 500 melange to craft it, then you reach the deep desert and decide that gameplay loop isn't really for you, but you still want to go after some of those T6 uniques, or at least try out some of those endgame items. Well, that 500 melange that you saved up could go towards a lot of those things. Let's look at some of the costs for some of the more common later game things that you might want. A Mark 6 Scout Thopter totals 410 melange. If you were just looking for those speed upgrades, you could skip out on the cockpit, the chassis, and the hull. It would only cost 245 melange. The Mark 6 rockets are 81. A Mark 6 buggy cut array is 81 melange. A Mark 6 power pack, 27 melange. A lot of the tier 6 uniques range from 60 to 100. Like the compact compactor is at 83, and the Kynes cut array is at 72, two of the more popular ones that you might want to go after. You could get a lot of these things with that 500 melange that you're trying to save up for the Large Spice Refinery. So it's just a suggestion for those more short-term players. If you like the gameplay loop and or you continue on with PvP, then you should definitely save up for this. The yield is better, so it is a must for the long-term player, but you don't have to rush to get it. The large ore refinery is far more important in my opinion. I would definitely recommend getting some of these items above, like the Kynes cut array, compact compactor, and Mark 6 power pack, and maybe even the speed components for the Scout Thopter, all before you invest in the Large Spice Refinery. Because after you get it, there might not be a whole lot that you want to go after. And by the way, if you are wondering how you can get the Kynes cut array or compact compactor Mark 6, or a lot of other really good tier 6 uniques, check out your Lands Rad regularly. I made a video about this, so feel free to check that out if you need more information, but this is definitely the place to get most of your tier 6 unique schematics. A lot easier than trying to get them from the shipwrecks or testing stations. Drop egg farming is a technique you can use to farm things a little more safely. When you drop items on the ground, they will last there in the bag for 20 minutes. What you would do is collect your spice, fly off to a nearby island, or the open sand works too, it's a little more risky, stash your bag somewhere hidden, fly back, collect more spice until you have a full load. You can start a new pile to reset the timer, then carry some home and come back with an assault and safely grab the rest, or just keep using your scout. This method has its positives and negatives. The main issue is that it's more time consuming. In general, the more time you spend out there, the more likely someone hostile is to fly by. But it's safe because if you lose your Thopter, you at least don't lose a full load of work. It minimizes your losses in the worst case scenario. The best part about it is that you are farming with a scout and thrusters. It makes it a lot easier to get away, so chances of losing your Thopter are also minimized. A couple things to note, people can scan for these bags, but it's going to be rare someone is out searching for your spice stash. Dropping something near a current bag puts it into the same bag. Refilling it does not reset the timer. You will have to start a new bag or pick everything up to reset a timer. Speed can be just as effective as this drop bag method, so I'll mention some good times to use it when I talk about spice farming, because it's not always the best strategy. First, I want to quickly talk about the mindset when farming spice. You are going to get attacked, you are going to get ganked, you are going to lose an ornithopter, but you can definitely, absolutely still get more than enough spice as a solo. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. That's the mentality you should have. Think of it more like a really difficult but dynamic boss fight. Sometimes that boss is friendly, there's no need for a fight. Sometimes you sneak around it and you don't need a fight at all. Sometimes that boss is too difficult and you'll have to come back another time. And maybe if you're brave enough, sometimes you just need to fight back a little for that spice. The point is, it is not like regular resource farming. Once you know where to go and how to farm in regular resource farming, it's the same repetitive process over and over. With spice farming, this is not the case. It is going to be different every time. You never know what to expect. So if you are expecting to come away with a big haul and you can't get any, you're going to be pretty disappointed. But if you stay consistent, follow these strategies, and think of each spice venture as its own unique experience, you will come away with more than you need. Don't get greedy. Get spice when you can. Know that it's not a 100% success rate, and just be patient. Large spice fields are usually an all or nothing approach. What that means is everyone there is friendly and you can freely farm spice until someone hostile shows up, or rockets are being fired and you probably shouldn't be there at all, unless you are looking for a fight. Rockets won't always be actively firing though in hostile spice fields, so it is good to know when they're actually safe or not. Always approach with caution. Altitude is your best friend. You can see spice activity before any thopter is in render. The large piles will disappear from a further render distance. This is good to see first if there are people farming. If it's a large guild, you'll see those crawler tracks, in which case it's probably not a good idea to approach any closer. Guilds will often shoot on sight when spice farming with a crawler, so try to avoid that without at least asking first. If you see multiple people farming, slowly drop down to an open spot and hover. Before you get out though, you want to make sure it's actually friendly. You want to draw out any hostile people and see what the vibe is. You can do that by simply hovering above the ground. If someone is hostile, they will usually get really excited and start blasting you before you get out. Now you know it's not safe. But if you hover there and no one attacks, hop out. But don't let your guard down. A smarter person is going to be waiting for you to get out. Stay under your thopter for a few seconds. Slowly start compacting a couple piles. After you've been standing there outside your thopter for a few seconds and no one has attacked you, it is likely safe to keep going, but still never stray too far from your thopter. If someone new shows up, they are targeting the person farthest from their thopter, so stay close to it. The vibe could change at any moment. Someone could show up with rockets, or someone could just be bipolar and decide to start blasting you. So always stay alert throughout this whole process. Even if it feels safe, things could turn quickly. But when every other person is down on the ground farming, that's usually a peaceful session. If a bunch of other thopters start to go up like this even before a worm, it's always a good idea to go with them. A good rule is to just make sure that no one is hovering above you at all times. Let's say you show up to a spice field and there's a ton of thopters hovering. Maybe some people are farming, maybe not. But anytime there are multiple thopters hovering above, be very, very careful. Thopters on the ground farming is usually a sign of a peaceful situation, and you can likely join in. But if they are all up in the air, it is always risky. You'll do the same as before though. You're just going to test the waters. But this time you're not flying all the way down. If everyone in the air is in a group and they all start attacking you, you will for sure lose a thopter. In this case, you're going to want to stay in the air and approach slowly. See what they do. The gankers and the aggressors have itchy trigger fingers. All you really need to do is get close to someone and you'll know if they're hostile. Like in this case, I would have been blasted immediately if these people were hostile. Instead, he was just following me to see if I was equipped with rockets, because I was being that sketchy person flying above. Okay, so you show up to a guild farming, probably turn around and leave or ask. Show up to a bunch of farmers on the ground, it's mostly safe, but you should still be cautious. If you show up to a bunch of hovering thopters, be very cautious, but it still could be safe, and you can always ask as well. Now, what if you show up to an empty spice field? This will be more rare, but there's a good chance it's empty because someone keeps attacking anyone trying to farm it. You should be on high alert if you show up to this. This is the perfect time to use drop bag farming though for spice, because it's only a matter of time before someone else shows up or the attackers show back up. Get what you can, stash it, come back and see if you can get more, until those attackers or hostile group ultimately shows back up. You still need to be cautious though, just like before. Hover on the ground for a moment, try to draw out any attackers first. When the coast is clear, quickly grab a couple of piles, but do not get greedy. Every time you go back, check the area above, do a quick fly around, quickly drop down and get more. But keep checking the skies. And when someone does inevitably show up, get back in immediately and be prepared to run. Like in this instance, I just got back from my drop bag. There was no one in sight, but before I could even get 2 more piles, out of nowhere the attacker showed back up. But because I continued to pay attention, stayed close to my thopter, I was able to get back in and get away safely before he had a chance to blast me. Overall, I only recommend using drop bag farming if it's an empty field that feels sketchy. Normally, you can tell what the vibes are with a little bit of awareness. If you pay attention to what people are doing, read the room as I've mentioned last time, it is better to wait for a peaceful, large spice field than constantly trying to risk being sneaky. But depending on your server, if it's extremely hostile, Being sneaky with drop bag farming might be your only option, but it shouldn't be your first choice. I think there are probably more drop bag cases for medium spice fields, so let's talk about those. The problem with these mediums fields is that the spice bloom lasts forever. Someone will always see it, and by the time the bloom is gone, someone will almost always have farmed it. Your options are to be the first one there or wait for scraps. If you are first, somebody else is definitely on their way, so be cautious. You can risk it and just hope that someone lets you farm peacefully, but that's highly unlikely. Or you can drop bag farm. Quickly grab a couple piles, fly off and stash it, and come back to see if you can get more. If no one has showed up yet, get more piles, but likely someone will be there by now or very soon. And you can either ask to continue farming or you can patiently wait out of render. Remember, you can see spice activity outside of character and thopter render distance. No one is bringing a crawler to these fields, so that means the thopter or two that is farming won't be there for very long. Wait for them to leave. Go in and continue getting more piles for your drop bag. If they have farmed a large majority of it, it's probably safe for you to farm normally. Equip your storage and fill up a full load. These mostly gone piles are the safest way to get spice as a solo, in my opinion. For larger guilds, it's usually not enough to justify their time. If someone flying overhead sees this, they likely will keep flying. If they are flying up out of render, it's hard to tell if someone is even down there. With fresh piles, you can see those gaps disappearing, but when all those gaps are mostly gone already, it makes it really hard to even notice when somebody is down there unless you're within render distance. So these should be your target. I personally get about 50% of all my spice from these half-gone fields. The same rules apply here though. You still need to be cautious and stay close to your thopter at all times. Be ready to hop in and fly away if someone does show up. Being quick is just as much a strategy as being stealthy, so don't rely too heavily on the drop bag method. Start there with the drop bag, and then when things seem a little less risky, like when the bloom goes away and the pile is mostly gone, see if you can switch to that speedier method and just fill up quickly and get out. For small spice fields, I wouldn't even bother if I were you in the deep desert. It is an unnecessary risk in my opinion. As tempting as it may be when the spice is not flowing, I think you're better off going to Haga Basin and farming spice fields there. You'll get more and it's safer. There are plenty of things that you will still be farming in Haga Basin anyway. Fibers for filters, aluminum and jasmium for backup thopters and repairs, flour sand, and so on. Anytime you are out farming other things, have your compactor and go out of your way to get that spice flow anytime you hear it in Haga Basin. You'll be surprised, I think, by how much you can actually get if you just take that little bit of time to go after that spice flow. Yes, you will then have to haul it out into the deep desert, if that is where you put your spice refinery, so it's extra trips. But you aren't hauling massive amounts, so carrying a little bit out into the deep desert to refine it isn't really that big of a deal, because you'll end up carrying those filters and fuel and other things back and forth anyway, so you can easily stash it on your character anytime you make that trip. The first thing to know is that Titanium and Stravidium dense islands have largely become war zones. These are very hostile and they're always populated. It is wise to avoid them entirely, which you can definitely do because there are plenty of other locations. The first thing you'll want to do is scout. Speed is your best friend for this, so knowing exactly where the nodes are is really helpful. Scan and reveal 15 to 20 of each Titanium and Stravidium nodes, flying around in your scout with thrusters. I like to focus on Atro and make a single trip across the map, going to every single island. If you are using the Planetologist app, it's player reported, so you might find islands that are not reported or find these nodes in empty blocks on the map. You'll want to fly across and physically see for yourself. When it's time to farm, simply take that same exact route. Fly mid-height so that you can see the ground render and the render above you to see if anyone is nearby. Drop down, quickly farm whatever one or two nodes is just within a close distance. I personally like to move from node cluster to node cluster in my thopter, even on the same island. This might seem unsafe, but remember, speed is the key. The alternative method is to park somewhere hidden and go around the entire island collecting everything. The problem I have with this method is that it's more time spent on the ground, which is your most vulnerable position. It's faster to quickly drop in, grab the nodes, and move on than it is to safely park, run around, and try to grab all the nodes. If someone spots your parked Thopter while farming, they can blast it pretty quickly before you can get back to it. If someone spots you while it is parked, they can destroy you, even with your shields on, before you can make it back, if it's too far away. This is why I like to stay close to my Thopter at all times. It is your safety net. You want to be able to get back to it immediately if someone else shows up. So being on the other side of an island when you hear that Ornithopter landing is a really risky situation, in my opinion. A couple things to make this feel even safer. Each time you get your node, hover back up a decent height and give a 360 look around. If you go up high enough, you'll be able to spot anyone who might be hanging out slightly out of render or anyone who is potentially approaching. It is good to check if the coast is clear before dropping down and farming each node or each node cluster. When you land, for the first time, you can use the hand scanner to spot anyone who might be hiding out. If you didn't know, it shows enemy players as a water source, so you can see if anyone is hiding on the island. You can use drop bag farming for this. Just like with spice farming, it is safer, but it is going to take you a lot more time. In this case, it is going to take significantly more time compared to the spice farming, because you are going from island to island, and everything is more spread out. It kind of starts to become really tedious to go back and forth to your drop bag, and then on top of that, trying to manage that 20-minute decay timer can start to feel pretty bad. Speed is your best friend when farming Titanium and Stravidium, so the added time it takes with the drop bag farming, I'm not even sure it's worth it. But you might be on an impossibly hostile server, so being a little stealthier might be your only option. Overall, there really is no secret to this. I will say it one more time. Speed is the key. These smaller islands are low traffic. People are not usually hunting here. If you happen to run into someone else, they're usually another farmer who probably doesn't have rockets on them, or you just have bad luck and someone is happen to be flying by. But unlike Spice Fields, where gankers are actively hunting people down, these areas are way less traffic heavy, so being quick as possible reduces your chances of ever being seen. Hovering after each node ensures that you see someone before they can see you, and not trying to hide your Thopter ensures that you can spend as little time as possible on each island. On average, I can get a full assault load of Titanium and or Stravidium in 20 minutes round trip, after I've already scouted out my nodes. If you didn't know, rocket launchers slow you down significantly. The Mark 6 Scout flies at 146 with rockets, making it slower than the Mark 5 Assault, which glides at 151. The Mark 5 Scout glides at 171, so significantly faster. This means with storage on Assaults or Scouts, you can fly faster than anyone with rockets. Now this could change with an upcoming buff to Assault Thrusters, but their goal overall seems to make sure that rockets slow you down. If you are already in the air when getting attacked, there is a very good chance of escaping because of this fact. If you are on the ground though, it can still be very hard to get away, especially if you're caught off guard. The best thing you can do is climb immediately. Altitude is your best friend. The reason is that it's very difficult to fire rockets upward. As soon as they point that nose up, they lose altitude and speed very quickly, which allows you to gain distance. Even if you're trying to balance it and go up and down to maintain that speed, you can see the Mark 6 struggles to even maintain that 140 kilometers. And if they were trying to get a better angle on you, they would have to climb, which is really slow in a Scout. You would continue to gain distance on them, at which point they probably wouldn't be able to catch back up to you. So it's very important that as soon as you start getting blasted, climb all the way up immediately and stay up as high as you can. Try to be up past that fuel line if you have those fuel cells for it. Point your nose due south and go in a straight line back to the PVE zone. Don't get fancy and try to dodge. That wastes your speed, and the rockets have a pretty large AoE anyway, so you just want to stay up high and go straight back. This dynamic makes the assault more effective than people think. Having the thruster for quick climb speeds is extremely helpful. You can climb faster than a Scout, and that climb is arguably the most dangerous time. Once you are up at altitude, obviously the Scout can get away faster, but getting up to that altitude, the Assault wins out. And also the fact that the Assault can outrun a Mark 6 with rockets makes it regularly usable. Okay, even with good strategies though, there are some things that you just can't avoid. If a whole guild comes and attacks you while on the ground, there isn't much you can do. If you aren't that experienced and there's a couple really good pilots, they also might be able to catch up to you. Eventually though, you will lose a Thopter. So instead of being upset about it, let's prepare you to recover from it. I'm going to show you how to get your ornithopters back in a very efficient manner. You know how to get these resources already, but I want to make it as quick as possible for you. So in this example, I'm going to use 2 Mark V assault ornithopters with thrusters and storage. I'm using Mark V because it's kind of like the Goldilocks. The Mark VI is a little too expensive to be using in high-risk situations, and the Mark IV is a little too fragile and slow. So the Mark V is just right in the middle, not that bad to craft, and it's durable and fast enough that it makes it competitive. I'm using the Assault instead of Scouts for this example, simply because it's more expensive. So if you are replacing your Scout, that just means this process will be even quicker for you. This example is sort of the absolute upper end of the amount of time that it will take to get your Thopters back. For these resources, the testing stations in the A zone of the Deep Desert tend to have the most per chest, and it's easiest to farm large amounts. You can run through these without finding anyone, especially once you know the layouts. You can get like 50 to 100 or so of the particle capacitors and advanced servox from each station. It'll take you 20 to 25 minutes to collect the 300 and 188 that you would need. The armor plating is a little bit harder to get here, but still you want to try to grab as many as you can from these lockers. Then if you just look at all this extra loot that you're going to end up getting on top of those parts, a lot of the times you'll get ornithopter parts, which can save you more time and resources. So you're definitely going to want to farm these testing stations in the A zone when you're going after the particle capacitors and advanced servox. You should already know how to get these at Misatero. Typically you can get enough for 1 assault in 1 trip. So if you need 2 assaults worth, either go back twice once it respawns, or you can always travel to another siege. But this is a 5-minute or less trip. So let's say you do it twice. I'll say conservatively, it should be 10 minutes total to farm this for your assault. You should be a master at aluminum and duraluminum by now, so this is another quick farm. For me personally, it only takes 6 minutes to farm this much aluminum and 12 minutes to farm the duraluminum, and that includes the drive back in my buggy. The crafting time on aluminum is extremely long, so this will be the real bottleneck to this whole thing. Just make sure to do this first, or at least before you log off. It'll take a lot of hours, so you won't be able to do this in 1 session. So this is the only one that you really need to plan ahead for. For cobalt paste, you only need a 984 erythrite, so you can just fly over and grab this quickly with your scout and storage. You can get all 4 of these parts from the crashed ships in the PVE zone of the Deep Desert. You only really need 1 ship to get most of these. Just make sure you get all 3 compartments. The armor plating will likely be the one that you don't get enough of. That is why it's good to grab them from the testing stations when you're there. You still might need more. I find it best to either find another shipwreck, or if you just don't want to fly around and just can't seem to find one, you can just go buy them, either from the exchange or one of these 3 vendors. They aren't terribly expensive, and it will save you a ton of time if you're having trouble getting those. For these ones, you can get them both at the chests from the faction strongholds in Haga Basin. They are very easy to get. Go for the Constellation chest. Usually that chest has enough overall for what you need. Otherwise, just grab a couple more of the chests that you find, and you'll definitely get what you need in 5 minutes or less. All of this will take you approximately 80 minutes. This is starting from no resources. Remember, you will most definitely have a lot of this stuff already, so that cuts down on time. You could buy a bunch of the resources too. That would also cut down on time. You might only be crafting scouts instead of assaults, so that would be fewer resources and therefore less time overall as well. So even if you lose your assault ornithopter, you'd have to spend no more than 80 minutes to get 2 more of them. An hour and 20 minutes of gameplay is doable even for the most casual player to get back on your feet after you've been attacked. So just know when it inevitably does happen, the recovery time is not terrible. The Shipwrecks and Testing Stations past the B zone are tier 6, even the PVE testing stations. This means that you can get plastanium infused dust and tier 6 unique schematics in these chests. The PVE zoned ones are like the others. Each player can get their own loot. They are a challenge. These lock you in a room and you have to face off against multiple waves of the T6 enemies. And you can definitely do this with T5 armor and weapons. It certainly helps to have those uniques, and it is possible to solo it as well. But a lot of the time, you won't even have to. Because it's pretty much the only endgame PVE challenge and a good way to get the dust, people are running this constantly. So if you go during peak hours, there's a real good chance as a solo, you can easily run through it or just get all those rewards if someone is just finishing up. There's a lot of ways you can take this on, but I will make one recommendation. Having a good melee weapon and a Mark 6 power pack helps a lot. The firepower of these enemies is ridiculous, and when you are firing back, obviously your shield is down. So being able to take down these enemies one by one with a melee weapon while your shield is up makes things a lot easier, even if you are in heavy armor. These can take some time to complete, so a faster method to get that dust, if you're searching for that specifically, and schematics as well, is going to those shipwrecks. As always though, these are PvP, no matter where they are, but they are less likely to be camped than pretty much any other thing in the deep desert. You can drop in undetected, scan with your scanner to see what is happening. If you see all the enemies inside standing still, it's probably safe. If there are no enemies, someone was recently there and you probably can't get anything from the chest anyways, so you can move on. If you see a few enemies or you see that one lone water droplet moving around, then obviously someone is in there. But with your scanner, you can know if it's safe to enter. The layouts seem limited. I have personally only come across this one so far, which is the same as the Wreck of Palace and Vermilius Gap. There are probably other layouts, but the point is, you'll want to learn the layouts so that you can quickly run in and grab the loot without having to fight off all these really difficult NPCs, and without having to spend too much time in there. These will usually have a lock-in room, at least this layout does, so you will have to fight off a few of the NPCs, but it's nothing like the testing stations. Make sure to pocket your Thopter and bring no more than one fuel cell. That way, if someone does show up, you don't lose anything, and it's really not a big deal. But what's more likely is that you will run in and out in no time at all and be on your way without even ever seeing anybody. When it comes to the PvP testing stations, you really shouldn't be thinking of these as a good place to get loot. They will be chaotic, they will be difficult, and there will probably be someone waiting outside to gank you, even if you do successfully run it. Instead, think of these as strictly a place to go for PvP, for fun. It's like a Royal Rumble in there. Everyone is fighting everyone, even their own teammates, because it's so chaotic. There will be some loot that is exclusively found here, but you can always get this from other players with trading. It's going to be a nightmare for you if you expect to come away with schematics from these testing stations. I'm not saying it's not possible, but don't go in expecting it and don't get your hopes up. It's like when you go to a casino. You should never expect to win, but you might just come away with that free car.